Hey friends, welcome to another episode of our podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We are wrapping up Luke 6 today. So on Sunday, preached through the final verses of Luke chapter 6, which are the Sermon on the Plain, the wrap up to the Sermon on the Plain. This was also the wrap up to our community Bible study. So month-long, 4 Wednesdays of people gathering to study the Bible, which is just such a, on the one hand, such a simple thing to do, but so profound. Like, it was an awesome month. The table leaders did a fantastic job. The teaching team did a fantastic job. It all the way through. I loved getting to see this for the first time.
It was a lot of fun, and I feel like the flow of these particular passages as well. There's so much going on with them that it lent itself to just really robust discussion, and I couldn't be happier, and it was a lot of fun, and so glad we were able to do that for the Sermon on the Plain. Yeah.
It was great. The thing that I found, I don't know if you found this, the week that you preached during the series or during the study, was we had all of the, so I sat in on some of the teaching team, not all of the teaching team prep, but some of that. And then I had all of my own personal research and study and prayer and time and reading, etc., all of the things. And then we had the Wednesday Bible study, and then I preached on Sunday, and I'm like, there's still things. I know. There's still stuff to cover, and ways in which it was new every time. I love that about the way Scripture works and the way God uses it is the reason why we say it is alive and active and speaking and continues to be, not because of every time you read it, maybe you're going to glean something new yourself from it, but because actually this is the work that the Holy Spirit does, is unveiling these deep, meaningful, important pieces of truth that you can read it over and over and over again and still come back to it fresh. And that was my experience of the study anyways. Was
mine as well.
I was worried I was going to get to Sunday and be like, well, I have nothing left to say, which was not the case, especially this past Sunday when I went too long.
Well, but you're getting different angles, because you're getting what is your average congregant kind of wrestling through with the passage? What are they confused about? What are we confused about? Because if we're confused about it, they're certainly going to be confused about it, or maybe just glaze over, you know. It feels like by the end of the whole process, we're able to capture some, but still not all. And that's, again, it's remarkable just the way that God's word works in that way, and it's so powerful, and it was a real privilege to be a part of. So
So thanks for jumping in on it, and if you didn't, there will be another chance in the future to do so. But for now, Luke 6, like I said, so we're wrapping up. We've got two. We put them together. But two mostly related, somewhat different takes on Jesus's wrap up to this sermon. This is a tree and its fruit. This is house and foundation, fruit being good or bad, houses being hit by storms. I added in a couple other examples of trees and fruits, and maybe confused the waters by the end.
Did you water your grapefruit plants?
I think it's still in the sanctuary. I think I accidentally left it there.
Oh, no.
It needs some help. But I had this plant. I had an aloe plant. This is the only plant that I should ever purchase.
Right.
Is desert plants. So I had an aloe plant at the beginning of the pandemic that was in my office. And with how the pandemic hit, I ended up just making a home office that I used for both work, meeting with people over Zoom, and also recording for Sunday services and things like that. And in my mind, I just thought, everybody else is home, so people will. I don't want to perpetuate the feeling necessarily of loss. So if I'm why do I get to be in the church? They want to be there. I'm there. They can't be there. So I'll record from home, and then we're all on an even playing field kind of thing. But where I'm going with this story is I left that aloe plant in my office.
For months?
No, the entirety of the pandemic. Went back it was there a year. And I went back, and that thing was just living its life. It was not healthy, but it was not dead.
Secretly, your wife was like going in and like
somebody
watering.
must have been watering it. Like this poor plant. Yeah, I wish I knew that. But no, I think it just did its desert thing and sucked water out of the air. But no, my grapefruit tree is probably not going to do that.
So maybe let's read. It's not a super long. I think it's helpful just as a refresher. What translation do you have there?
This week I'm reading from the ESV.
Right.
So, which is not usually the translation that I use.
Yeah. And you, I'd be curious if you could explain a little bit of the one word in particular that might be 100%. Interesting. Yeah. Yep. So I had the ESV and the NIV pulled up here. But I'll start if you want to read the final section. So, so this is from Luke 6, starting at verse 43. For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks.
Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I will show you what he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built the house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great.
Not in a good way, great.
Not in a good way. No, I think literally it says, and great was its ruin. Which is just, very dramatic.
It is, yeah. So maybe as because this won't take long, at least maybe not. I'm curious. Like you chose the the ESV versus the NIV, which we typically will preach from, and you said it was really centered around a particular word. So what was that for you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think it's worth saying that we were talking about this a little bit off camera, but like one of my hang-ups with the ESV, I think in many ways it's a very literal translation, which
can be good.
Yeah, I like it for preaching for that reason. It's clunky to read. So if you're looking for a readable translation, I don't think this is it. Like the NIV reads better, the NLT reads better. Both translations that I have and will continue to preach from. I have always through my entire life read most from the NIV, and then I'll switch for a reason or a purpose, and then I find myself going back to the NIV. So whether that's just habit and that's what I'm used to and what I'm comfortable with, that's to be discussed. But certainly this is not like the best reader's version. What I would say, the one word though that I really wanted to be it hammer home or be crystal clear on is where Jesus says, out of the treasure of a person's heart.
Good treasure, evil treasure.
Yeah. So in verse 45, the good person out of the good treasure of their heart produces good. And you have the NIV up there, so can you read that verse there?
So it says, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart.
Yeah.
And an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart.
Yeah. So right off the hop, obviously we're not talking about men exclusively here. Yeah. This is gendered language, but it's referring to all of humanity. So that's one. But mainly the difference that I wanted to tease out is exactly what's lacking in the NIV. So the good stored up in his heart. And this language around treasure, which is, again, like this is literal translation, thesaurus, treasury. It does mean storehouse, so I get why they go stored up. But
it's inference rather than
what's a more literal translation. For me, the main point that I was making at this moment in the sermon was the difference between just thinking, oh, if I input enough good into my life, then good will flow out. And like that might be true to some degree. Like you are what you consume informs and shapes and does ultimately control even who you are and who you become and what you output. There is truth to that. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. He's not saying do enough good or, be around enough good or input enough good so that you can then do good or be good or become good.
Yeah.
He's not creating this structure whereby, we input what we need so that we can output what is good. We input what is bad, and therefore we output what is bad. What he's saying is what you treasure in your heart. And on Wednesday, on Sunday a little bit, I talked about that. The heart in Jesus's day is not just like the thump organ in your chest. This is the core of all of how you make decisions. It is your being, your
will center.
Your will, your will, your desires, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings. All of it is described as heart.
Yeah.
So Jesus is saying here, what your heart treasures will determine how you live your life, the output. And
which makes it a little less about like do
exactly
right, because it's saying like, hey, whatever like I do like the word abundance there for out of the abundance of the heart, the over whatever spills out of your heart. The treasure there, it'll be good or evil because it's what your heart is full of because of what you filled it with in some ways.
Yeah. And the piece that I really wanted to avoid was just somebody walking away thinking, okay, if I store up enough good, then I will be good. This isn't. I don't know. Those old school video games where you're like top down looking, like we all played them instead of like doing computer like typing classes and stuff, where you're just like you mine for stuff, and then you can build this, and then you can build that, and then you sell this and the money, and like my world conquers your world. What was that? It doesn't matter.
There's Command and Conquer.
That's the one I'm thinking of. I think it's like this isn't like this isn't a matter of going around collecting enough good and hiding it away so that you can, eventually have enough good to buy your way into the kingdom. And like, that's a really simple, reading of it. It's also a very specific reading of it. But in my preaching, I wanted to lean us as far away from that as possible.
Yeah.
And also capture what I think isn't just, so what this is also not is an assent of knowledge.
Right.
It's not just intellectual assent toward goodness. It's not if I think good thoughts, if I learn what is right and true and good and noble and lovely, then I will become what is right and true and good and noble and lovely. Like, I think if our denomination actually, we part of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, we say we're small P, we have people from all over the Christian world, and we have people coming in who have no Christian experience. So fantastic. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But I think if there is a cultural sin, if I could put it that way, of our denomination, historically, it's like an spiritual, intellectual arrogance.
Yeah.
That says to know something is to be transformed by it, and we know, we by experience that to know something in your head does not mean that it's gotten into your heart, and to know it and to know that it's right and good and true is not also to treasure it.
Right.
To treasure it is to pursue it, is to desire it, is to allow it to shape your wants and your desires and your feelings, your emotions, the core center of who you are. And to want for it above other things it is treasuring life inside the kingdom and Jesus and his love and who he is and who he's making you to be. And that's far more compelling to me than know the right thing become the right person.
And like knowledge can be powerful. Knowledge is good. It's not dismissing that, but it is an incomplete picture of what Jesus is inviting us into here.
Yeah.
And you cannot attain, in some ways, I think Jesus would be saying here, you cannot attain the good life on that alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Nor is that going to be the starting point for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I worked at a camp for a number of years, and the camp doesn't matter, but they had a slogan, and the desire for all the staff, I think it was something like knowing, being, doing. And this idea was like, you know, and then you be, and then you do. And I go, for so many of us, that's backwards. Mm-hmm. Right? I need to do my way into knowing sometimes. Most times, in fact.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we just, to know something does not necessarily mean that you will become something, does not necessarily mean that you will do something. It might, for some people, be that order. So Jesus isn't saying know something first, because what does he say? He says, come follow me. Come be with me. And watch. And in the being with, in the doing, in fact, the disciples begin to know and discover who Jesus is. And they're called into greater doing and greater being, greater becoming. It changes and shapes who they are.
Yeah.
But that first call is not, hey, sit down and let me tell you who I am. And then you'll want to follow me.
And in fact, he seems to avoid that quite often. Jesus, he's very, very, conservative in his, in his revealing of all the specifics and details of who he is and why God the Father has him doing what he's doing. And so I think that's a good way to think about that, is that Jesus doesn't come in and just unload a bunch of information, which is, I think a good seminary experience for a pastor should not just be unloading a bunch of information. There should be a spiritual formation component to it. There should be hey, if you can learn all of this information and still be a rotten pastor,
listen, like I know people who came out of seminary with no faith.
Right.
So technically knew all of the things.
Yeah.
And walked away with less of a life-giving, alive faith in Jesus than when they started. And that's a sad thing for me to reflect on now. So just to answer your question, to loop back around, ESV for this week. Yeah. Largely because I could have done the work to get us from storehouse to treasure, but I do find that sometimes that works and sometimes that's interesting and you can take people along for that ride. And sometimes I just want to get there faster. That makes sense. And if I can use a different translation to do that, then I'll do that. Yeah. But that was the main reason.
Well, we were talking about one day we'll do a little bit of a separate podcast about topics like Bible translations, and that could be a lot of fun, because even when we look at our community Bible study, we used the NRSV for that, and and the New Revised Standard Version. That's what it stands for. That's considered like the classic inductive Bible study. That's what you use when you do that kind of work.
It's considered the academic English translation. So if you're not working from Greek or Hebrew, the expectation in many academic settings is that you use NRSV. So much so, can I personal, gripe here for a second? And I've told you this story, I think. When I was in undergrad, I think it was like a full letter grade on a paper because I used the NIV and not the NRSV.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Not the content of the paper. This was like theology class. Yeah. And, my prof was like, you should have known that the NIV is not an academic translation and the NRSV is the only acceptable academic translation. I was like, well, you're the prof, dude. So if I didn't know something, I didn't say that. I was not that bold in undergrad. But I still remember that just to this day. This was a brilliant, loving, and also very specific theology professor who I had during my undergrad, who had made the migration. I think he had made the migration from evangelical all the way to Catholic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of his faith. So really fascinating, deep spiritual journey. So, those are people who you just, okay, I'll listen and figure it out. Otll do better next time.
But it'd be a lot of fun to kind of talk through like why is that the case? And does that mean these other translations are lesser, and if you ever use like the Bible app, like on your phone or tablet or whatever, when you pull it up here, we'd be here for an hour trying to count all these. Like, it's wild, right? And so like, what's going on there? It'd be fun to explore that and talk through, even just simply to say, like, sometimes it's just different tools in the belt, right? That there are strengths and weaknesses to certain translations, because translating from Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic is difficult. And absolutely. So, I think a tool in a tool belt is exactly the reason why I flipped this week. And we'll see where I go for next Sunday. I think we're back in NIV next Sunday. So great. All right. So why don't we talk a little bit about this latter section on this little parable, this little metaphor that Jesus uses of Jesus sort of summarizing his teachings. Everyone who hears my words and does them. I missed the first step. Everyone who comes to me, hears my words and does them, I will show you what he's like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. I think there's some questions that are worth asking about the who and the what of the metaphor, right? Because it can be a little unclear sometimes, and so when we look at the foundation is what everything else is built upon. Right. So it is crucial, and it is the reason why this house, when the floods arise, does not get swept away, and why the other house does get swept away. So what is precisely the foundation?
Yeah. So there's I think there's probably a couple different ways of reading this or understanding it. I think the Sunday school answer is like, well, Jesus is the foundation. But if we look, there's a couple different comparisons that I think are worth pointing out, or a couple differences in the comparison. So in 48, he is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. Okay. And then if we jump down in 40, the latter part of 49, like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. So there's multiple things happening. So there's no foundation, and there's a foundation in the good house, or we're assuming at this point, good house, right? The wise builder in other iterations of this story, the wise builder builds. There's a foundation on a rock, and the second person, is there's no foundation, and it's not on the rock; it's on the ground. So there's multiple differences. So. I think in part we can extend that and think through, Jesus elsewhere is called cornerstone, the cornerstone, referred to as the cornerstone in the New Testament. So is Jesus the cornerstone of the foundation? Is he the rock? Is he the foundation? I think for just the simple reading of this is, I think of Jesus' life inside the kingdom, because we haven't gone deep down this, it's not a rabbit trail, but this direction yet. You can't talk about Jesus without talking about the kingdom of God. And you can't talk about the kingdom of God without talking about Jesus. So much so that it's not really even correct to talk about Jesus and the kingdom. Jesus is the kingdom.
Right. Yeah, they're inseparable. Yeah.
Jesus, like his arrival is the kingdom's arrival. His teaching is the kingdom. His death, his resurrection, this is the kingdom of God breaking into the world. So to say, Jesus and kingdom as separate is to miss a lot of what's going on. So I think, the rock, Jesus, kingdom of God, this is to have our foundation rooted or resting where it ought to rest. A foundation ought to rest on the rock. I mean, I understand that you can dig down past the frost line, pour concrete, make our own rocks. Like, I understand that much. Like, my deck that I built an extension on my deck, and like every day for a few days after, I was like, I just went out with my big 6-foot level and I was like, is it sunk yet? Like, did I go deep enough? And is it solid? So I think rock is Jesus, its kingdom. It is the right place for a foundation, and the right place for a foundation, we believe, is squarely kingdom of God, Jesus. The builder's building a foundation, so Jesus can't be the foundation. Like the builder places the foundation. I know all metaphors fall apart at some point and fail, but I think Jesus has already described what the foundation is. Then, if we back up, so everyone who comes to me, everyone who hears my words, everyone who does them. So just like just like we can't talk about Jesus as separate from the kingdom, or the kingdom as existing without Jesus, separate from Jesus, the foundation here can't be, it's just good works, right? It's just doing the things that Jesus says.
You've heard it all. Now go and do, and that's
your foundation. No, the foundation is first coming to Jesus, abiding, being with Jesus, allowing him to transform who you are, right? Hearing the words of Jesus. Again, here I think the language points us in a different direction than simply like, oh, I heard what you said. No, this is deep listening, absorbing. I've heard. Okay, I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you.
Yeah,
I'm going to change.
I was hearing you before. Now I hear you. Like it's a different layer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So come to Jesus, abide, rest, be with Jesus. Hear him, really hear him. Allow his words, allow his teaching, allow who he is to transform your heart and your mind, the core of who you are, all of it. And then live out of the overflow of who you are becoming, right? Of that relationship. So that's the foundation, and that's the foundation being placed on a rock, on Jesus, squarely inside the kingdom. So again, like I said, all metaphors fall apart, and you can stretch this one, I'm sure, to breaking. But I think really what Jesus is saying is, he's reminding the disciples of that first call. Come follow me, and I will teach you to fish for people, right? Come follow me. I'm not going to make you a tax collector of people, but like, come follow me, learn from me, watch. Eugene Peterson's translation of that, the passage in Matthew, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Eugene Peterson translates that, "Hey, if you're tired, if you're worn out, burned out on religion, come to me, get away with me." And he says, "Watch how I do it. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace, and you will learn to live freely and lightly." So that's the invitation of Jesus. Come, get away with me. Watch how I do it. You're going to learn to live like me. You're going to learn to live freely and lightly. He said, I'm not going to lay anything heavy or ill-fitting, but there will be things for you to do. There will be life for you to live. But it will fit. It will be well-fitting, like hand in glove, like a baseball glove that's been well, worn, soaked in hot water, and then tied around a baseball overnight and used for a couple of years. Like,
is that what you do?
That's how you do it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
You
cool.
soak it in hot water. You put it around like a softball or something a little bit bigger, and then tie it up real tight, and then, back when you had like 4-poster beds with like the ball on the top, that you tie it around the bedpost.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
you use that. Yeah. but this is the invitation of Jesus, is to life lived that is well-fitting. And I think that's really when you start to, okay, what is rock? What is foundation? Where do they meet? What is, like, how do you just, but that's what Jesus is talking about here, is that invitation.
So I can imagine that there are different, folks at different places in their spiritual formation. Some who, for better or worse, they just want to do. They just like, maybe that's their bent. They just like to serve. They just like to, whether it's in their church or whether it's, they can very clearly see, okay, these are the actionable things that Jesus has called me to do. I can do that. Yep. I've got money I can give. I've got time I can serve. Yep. I can do all these different things. And that's what Jesus calls me to do. Like, so you got someone who's more in that, but they really are wrestling with sort of the abiding piece of it, to just be with Jesus and to hear Jesus, right? And then you have others who are maybe a little bit on the other side. They're a little bit more contemplative. They like to, they like to journal, they like to write, but they struggle on the action piece. How do we? And I don't always like the word balance, because it's not. Balance is a myth, and also sometimes balance isn't the thing that we want here. But how do we maybe correct? Because I highly doubt any of us are like perfectly aligned in all these areas. Like that I highly doubt that there's anyone in our church who have found the perfect regimen of abiding, listening, being, and doing. Yeah. Right. So how do we think about that? How do we approach that?
This I think if we could solve this question, you could maybe package it. And anyways, I think there are two angles of approach here. The first is just to say that each of us is going to have a bent toward one or the other. Right? Like
Mary and Martha with Jesus.
Absolutely, and, right?
Yeah.
So to think about it, and you're not suggesting this, I know you're not suggesting this, to think about it, though, as purely an individual pursuit would be, I think, to fail right off the hop.
Yeah.
So we just need to realize, like, the Christian life is a life of and in community.
Yeah.
So you need to find your place into a community. And there are, like, we got guys who come on Thursday, and there's a workshop in this building. There's a table saw, there's a drill press.
Yeah,
I shouldn't give away all these secrets, but like, we have guys who come and they are building, they are fixing, they are maintaining, they are and the joy that there is in doing those things is a wonderful gift. I think, to each other, to the church, to our community. It is amazing. And that may continue forever, and it may not. It may have a season. I don't know. A bunch of those guys are getting their knees replaced. They're still here, like, faithfully working. And I genuinely believe it's because they love doing it, and they love the community of it and the conversation. And I should mention there are other groups of people in the building at the same time doing various things around. So we have a lot of people who love to jump in. And
I'm grateful for those guys that, like, they are the doers in many ways.
Absolutely.
And we need them. Yeah.
But not everybody is going to find that outpouring life-giving to the same degree as this current group of guys.
For those listening just on the podcast, I'm raising my hand.
Justin's hand is up.
Because that's me.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the best place to begin with this, is just to say that at the same time as we have that group going on, there have also been groups of people putting together stations, like prayer stations and prayer rooms, and thinking and praying through how we can encourage people into silence and solitude and contemplative prayer, and especially around Easter and Christmas, and at moments where we want to encourage people in that direction. Like we have people who are very, very gifted in doing that. I say doing, but in leading that charge as well. And as a church, I'm like, we need all of us. Yeah. So I think, be okay with who God has created you to be, and be okay that you'll probably have a bent toward one or the other. But I think at the same time, like if you're doing to exhaustion and you're burnt out and you're starting to become bitter and you're like, I'm the only one, like it's the same people all the time, and why is it me? And like, I'd really rather like listen to that as well. Yeah. And don't let that kind of creep in. To the person though, let me really answer your question. To the person who wants to try to shift where they're at, I think we like the doing. We like just easy steps because they're like, I can do those.
It's very concrete.
A, B, C. I can do that. A plus B equals C. That's a math I can do. And we like that. So I think one of the things that I've tried to do, and I don't know, I know where a friend of mine uses this language. I don't know where he picked it up, but like gamify some of the things that you want to do. Yeah. So if you've got a bent toward doing things, then schedule, like make the silence and the solitude and the contemplation, like gamify it a little bit, right? Even just write yourself a to-do list. Yeah. I do think that human beings are naturally wired to need silence and solitude, but I think we at the same time are bent away from it. We shy away from it. We don't need to go into all the reasons why, but I do think that if you are prone to doing, then use that strength and kind of schedule some of the being and sitting. And it's going to be awkward at first, and it's going to be hard, but schedule it in.
I could imagine for some folks, it could feel like a rote sort of tradition if you schedule it. However, I think there's actually still wisdom in it, right? Because for those of you who are wired that way, you may just need that to actually carve out the time, right? And there's always going to be a possibility that it becomes just another thing you're ticking off on your to-do list, but hopefully not. Like, do you have any thoughts on how to avoid that? Like.
Well, I think be okay with it just being something that you tick off on your box to begin with. Like, I think that's actually, I think that's where the downfall is that we have these defeater ideas. I think that's a Tim Keller line, like defeater ideas. He would always preach sermons. He's like, what are the defeater ideas that people believe that just make it impossible for them to believe what I am going to say, what the Bible is preaching, like what? So it's just like, what are the preconceived notions that we have that we walk in and just like instantly done? I'm not going to believe that because of this defeater belief over here. I think the defeater belief on this is that it's bad to schedule it, and it's bad for it to feel rote.
Okay.
Because it might need to feel rote to begin with. Like it's every time I pray, like I don't hear audibly the voice of God every time I pray. In fact, far fewer times than I actually pray. Like less than less than average, or less than the middle, right? Fewer than half. So again, different podcast. How do you hear from God? If it's not like God speaking to you audibly, like what are the various ways God is speaking to you, and what are the various ways God's speaking to us, to me? For sure, different podcast. But I think the defeater belief is that you need to have this like grand spiritual experience. Yeah. Every time you sit down to like, well, if I'm going to carve out time, and if I'm going to sit down, if I'm going to be silent, then it has to be this big thing. And it's not always that. Like there is a discipline that you need to learn. I think the doing of it is showing up. What we can't control is how God's going to move in that moment or during that time. So it's okay that it sometimes feels rote and I don't want to say meaningless, but that it feels like you didn't accomplish the thing that you were like hoping to accomplish.
Because it's not often about accomplishing, right? It's and that's maybe where our sort of productivity focused world can struggle, right? Yep. But I guess if we think about it, like this is like a maybe slightly silly, but like brushing my teeth twice a day is a rote ritual that I do blindly. It's just what you do because it's good for your teeth. I don't usually get anything out of that experience. I suppose my teeth do. But it is something that is good to do. It is right to do. I highly encourage it.
And you're healthier for it.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
I had a dental checkup and I had no cavities and they said, "Oh, it looks like you've been taking care of your teeth." And I was like, "Oh, great.
Someone noticed." But like you're not wrong. Yeah. You're not wrong. And listen, like there are going to be moments where God does show up and where it is that like earth-shattering ground out from under your feet kind of moment, or where you recognize, no, this is different. There's something about this. It's a holy experience. And there are going to be moments where you do it. I think learning the rhythm and habit of it is it's okay that we're talking about doing the thing in order to be with Jesus. Like your schedule needs to change. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, but it's not going to change unless you change it. You won't magically have time to spend with Jesus. It won't happen. Like nobody drifts accidentally into progress. Yeah. Yeah. And so you have to carve out time. You have to actually do the thing. You have to show up in order to make time and space for it. Yeah. So at that point, what I start to say to people is, and we've talked about this a little bit on early iterations of the podcast, like early episodes, but find a different space. Don't sit in your normal chair, but choose a spot and do a thing. Like I make coffee. Like that's kind of what I try to do. I make coffee in the morning, and there's part of me that wrestles and we're like, well, shouldn't I read my Bible before I make coffee? But no, like I'm prepping. Like there's a slowed down kind of preparation that happens.
It's a ritual. It's like ritual. In a good way.
In the best, the best form of that word, like in the best meaning of it. So that's okay. It's okay for it to be that. And, okay, if you need to flip the other way, if you are, if you're prone to spending a whole lot of time reflecting and thinking,
maybe like you're in your head too much. I think there are some folks I know that they can get in their head too much, where they are deep thinkers, and it can be beautiful. It can be like a wonder. We need deep thinkers. We need good thinkers. But
to them, I remind them of like the desert mothers and fathers. Who early monastics would withdraw from society into the literal desert. Yeah. One of my favorite is Evagrius of Pontus, who was like, well, Jesus went to the desert to fight the devil, so will I. Right. And that's what he did. Yeah. So at any rate, think about how much wisdom would have been lost if they went off into the desert and never returned. Never wrote, never communicated, never met with. If they left and kept leaving until they died, right? And maybe that happened for some. Maybe there's a ton of lost wisdom out there. But I just think about how much the church over centuries would have lost had that not been. No, this is a retreat with a purpose of return. And that's like a rhythm. That's a rhythm we need to learn in our lives. So, is there an outlet where you are processing and sharing and discerning on what you're hearing? Because the other thing that happens is you go so far sideways. You're like, Not sure you're hearing from God anymore.
Well, and there's
like,
probably some, if you look at church history, there are some very out there kind of monastic where they had these transcendent experiences that one could only describe as bizarre.
Well, most of the monastics did.
Yeah. But what I appreciate about church community is that we do get to kind of stretch each other a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. And there is opportunity, there is opportunity for all of the things that we're talking about, right? Where there are opportunities to serve and to do and in meaningful ways that are, like our team that you were talking about on Thursdays, they are helping with the they are stewarding our facility and property well, right? There are others that are serving on the front lines in our food cupboard, in the garden, and others who are helping, make coffee on Sundays and whatnot. And then there are others who are who are leading groups and in groups and experiencing, reading scripture, learning, growing. There are even folks I know who have led some studies over the years that are very almost like academic, right? Mm-hmm. And I know for some people that's been a huge benefit. That's been a real I learned so much and I'm really thinking about it and it's been really formative for me and that's fantastic, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love the way in which we can learn from each other and that we have these rhythms and even the rhythm of Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. That we are gathered and then we are scattered, right? Yep. That in and of itself is a microcosm of what we are ultimately called to do as followers of Jesus.
Yep. Yeah. So I think just to return to your question, and I was flipping around looking for something else that is gone now, but I do think that one of the practical things that people can do if they're listening, if you've listened to the end, here's the practical next step for you. Mm-hmm. I think there is a argument to be made that you sit down, look at your schedule, look at your energy output, look at the time output, look at how you are spending your life, and compare it to what Jesus invites us to. Come to me, be with me, hear my words, really hear them, and then go and live differently because of it. Go and put them into practice. So can you see those movements in the course of not a year, but each day? Mm-hmm. And can you see them in the course of a week? And this is where I really think journaling your life will change your life. Because I just think that so many of us, we don't actually think about the way in which we spend our time. Remember screen time first came out and everyone is that's not true. Surely that's not true. Please let that not be true. And then slowly what we've found is oh yeah, no, that's true. 100%. We all spend hours on it, on our phones, on our tablets, right? This is so yeah. I just, that was a mirror. That was a mirror moment where for so many people, it was your phone became this mirror. You're oh, I didn't realize that. And that's what a journal does, but in a much healthier way.
Yeah. It feels very bold that in this case, Apple, I'm sure Android has an equivalent. It feels bold that they would even do that.
It feels counterproductive.
It feels like they would not want you to reflect on that.
No, exactly. Exactly. Let's keep this one a secret.
Yeah.
But I think, some of the best, just some of the best daily rituals and the daily examine from Ignatius of Loyola, his daily examine is just a really clean, simple way of thinking through your day at the end of it and accounting for things throughout the day. And I just wonder if you break it down into those three things, how did I, and I do like John Mark Comer's language here, how did I spend time? How was I with Jesus? How did I spend time with Jesus? How am I becoming like Jesus? And how am I doing the things that he did and challenges me to do? And can I see those things daily? Yeah. Not in massive ways, but in slow, steadied, day by day, morning and evening. How do I see these things shape in my life?
I think that's a good point to drive home, is that it's very small, very incremental little things. Like I think that holiness and our growth, or to use a very Christian word, our sanctification process, it is slow. I think by design, that sometimes there are pivotal moments of radical conversion toward a new way of life. But in general, the life change happens very gradually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The one thing we can keep doing is showing up, right? And just one foot after the next. What's the next faithful step? That's another, just a good, like, don't think 10 steps down the road, right? Like, what's the next faithful step?
Yeah.
And there's grace abundant when we fail. Like, this is I'm an all or nothing kind of person. I'm like, listen, like this week I'm like journaling every single day. And then the next week you're like, I missed one day. So what's the point? Like, don't get sucked into that.
Yeah.
Just day by day, grace and grace abundant.
Yeah.
So, which I think is a great place to end for today.
It's been fantastic to go through this. Luke 6 has been a lot of weeks, but it's been so good to just go through every little bit of this significant teaching that Jesus gives us, and to learn how to take it all in. And I hope that we can continue to do that, and to do exactly what Jesus says to do here, which is to come to him, to hear his words, and ultimately to do them.